The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Weekly Forecast.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for January 24th through the 28th of 2022. Alright, we'll start off with the pound dollar. This is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this horizontal trend line that's attached to this pivot right here just became legitimate with its 3 touches at 1, 2, and 3 right here, and since price has a tendency to want to test strong levels in the long term, I'm long biased right back up to this horizontal trend line. And moreover, on the weekly chart, since there was a weak short trade that formed and a strong long trade that formed, in the short term I am long biased right back up to this high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. For a full explanation of what's been happening in the price in this entire area right here, please refer to the Forex Recap series. Okay, but the most recent move that happened was that there was a weak short trade that formed here, then a strong long trade formed, and so at this point the bias was long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. However, if you recall, there was a monthly gap level that runs right through these levels right here that could have possibly been a target for this weekly long trade right here, and so I was waiting for lower time frame confirmation of whether this monthly gap was a target or not, and the lower confirmation said it was not. And so I was looking for a long entry if price pulls back to the 3260 levels, roughly in these areas right here. However, I did not get that pullback to 3260 for this long entry. Now at this point, since this main target up here was not hit at this point, and for the time being the lower time frames are still confirming this long bias, if price gives a pullback right back down to these 3260 levels, or perhaps even these 3300 levels right here, while maintaining its lower time frame integrity of long strength, then I'll still be willing to take a long entry, again with the stop loss at this pivot low right here and its main target being right up here. Okay, so before I show you this monthly gap level, let me just show you what I'm looking for in terms of lower time frame confirmations in the coming weeks so I can actually get this pullback down for a long entry. Okay, so let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, just as a refresher, we had lower time frame confirmation of long strength. First of all, from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here, with that breakout and immediate break back in to this 1 hour trend line, showing that there was still long strength in this pair. And so price rose all the way up to these levels right here, where we got another 1 hour confirmation of long strength from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. Again, with a breakout and immediate break back into this trend line. And so I was expecting another move up all the way up to these levels where there was actually signs of waning long strength with no immediate recovery of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, right at this point right here. And so at this point, this long strength began to wane and I was expecting a further fall down at this point on the shorter time frames. And then if you recall, there was a key level on the 4 hour chart roughly in these areas to confirm this waning long strength. So let me show that to you. So let's go over to the 4 hour chart. Alright, so on this 4 hour chart, that trend line I was talking about is from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now as you can see, because there was no breakout and an immediate break back in, this confirms short-term short strength, which is actually what I want for a pullback to these 3300 levels for a long entry for that weekly bias. So in the coming weeks, I want more confirmation of this short-term short strength. And the 2 trend lines I'll be looking at is, first of all, this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. And moreover, this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now, what I want price to do to confirm short-term short strength is for price to come up to these trend lines, break it out, and an immediate break back in, almost giving the sense that this breakout was a fake. And moreover, I'll also be looking for short-term confirmation of short strength through price patterns. So for example, if there's a legitimate double bottom that forms on these lower time frames, and that includes the 1 minute chart, and since legitimate double bottom shows short-term long strength, I want the short strength to override this long strength by hitting its second bottom stop loss level before reaching its target height level. Okay, and moreover, if price does get back down to these 3300 levels for a long entry, I still want the lower time frame's integrity of long strength to kick back in. So in other words, what was happening on the 1 hour chart that I showed you earlier in these areas right here, I want these type of formations to kick back in as we near that weekly stop loss level, roughly at these 1.3160 levels right here. Okay, so finally, let me just show you that monthly gap level I was talking about earlier. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, that medium gap level I was talking about is this gap right here. The upper end will be 1.3401 and the lower end is at 1.3368. Okay, all right, so let's go on to the euro pound. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and strong and weak trades, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can understand these forecasts. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since the last confirmation of long strength was at this point right here, with a breakout of this trend line right here, and then an immediate break back in. However, since this long strength already went its distance all the way up to these levels right here, and a new trend line breakout from this pivot to this pivot right here, right at this level right here is not confirming continued long strength. In the long term, I'm short bias right back down to this trend line right here. However, since these type of breakouts, even if they do not confirm long strength with an immediate break back into the trend line, price often does wiggle around a bit and come back in eventually, almost as if it's just pulling back for a further fall down. So in the short term, I'm long biased right back up to this monthly gap level right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So there was a weak long trade that formed right here, then a strong short trade formed right here. So typically the bias in this case will be short. However, price hit a monthly gap level that runs right through these levels right here, which became a target for this short trade. So at this point, the bias was actually long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high right here before reaching this pivot low. And that target was hit the following week right here. And then 2 weeks later, there was actually a strong long trade that formed right here. However, again, price immediately hit that monthly gap level right here, which became a target for this long trade again. And moreover, there was another short entry that formed right here, which also hit this monthly gap level, which became a target for this short entry. However, in this case, there was lower time frame confirmation of short-term short strength confirming a short bias. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. And so that target was hit the following week again. And then price just hovered right back down to these levels right here, where the stop loss level was of that original long trade right here. And then for about a month or so, price just wiggled around and came back down to these levels, where it formed another strong long trade right here. However, once again, that monthly gap level right here became a target for this long entry. And so the bias became short again. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. And again, this target being hit on this long trade was confirmed at this point right here with lower time frame confirmation of short strength. And so in the following weeks, price came right back down to hit its main target at this level right here. And so at this point, I'm waiting for another long trade to form, then perhaps another short trade to form, so I could gauge the long strength against the short strength to derive a weekly bias, whether long or short. Now keep in mind, this type of price action on the weekly chart is characteristic of the euro pound, in which price action can be a little bit tricky, but I decided to post this pair just for educational purposes. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this type of price action can be quite confusing in determining a bias, but there is a way around it, and that's by using lower time frame confirmation to confirm biases. But before I get into that, let me just show you the key levels I'm looking at on this pair. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, let me just first show you the key gap levels that price is in between at the current moment. So the first one is this gap right here. So the upper level for that would be 0.8472, and the lower end would be 0.8423. Okay, in this lower gap, the upper level would be at 0.8337, and the lower end would be 0.8317. Okay, so this upper gap level right here at the current moment is providing short strength, while this lower gap right here, which is a little bit smaller, and although it doesn't create as much short strength as this upper gap, it does create about half the amount of long strength than this upper gap, simply due to the difference in size. Okay, and moreover, I'm also looking at this trend line from this pivot to this pivot to show some short strength. And finally, let me show you a horizontal level that's providing long strength. So let me just zoom out here. All right, so that horizontal level is from this pivot right here. Okay, so this horizontal level is providing long strength also. All right, so let me go ahead and show you how to get around those type of rangy markets where a monthly gap gets in the way of clean biases. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, those price patterns that confirm the bias on that weekly chart formed in this area right here, and another one at this area right here. And so as that long trade formed, there was a possibility that price hit that monthly gap level that runs right through these levels, just like I showed you on the monthly chart. And then at this level right here, there was actually a fake 1-hour HNS that formed, which typically shows short-term long strength. However, as you can see, price hit its height target roughly at these levels right here before reaching its right shoulder stop loss level, which indicates that although there was short-term long strength, short strength was able to override that long strength, which shows extreme short-term short strength. And so at this point, this 1-hour price pattern shows definitive confirmation that that long trade did in fact hit its target at this monthly gap level. Okay, and moreover at this point right here, again, if you recall, there was another long trade that formed running right into this monthly gap level, which can become a target for this long trade. And there was actually a 15-minute legitimate HNS that formed right here. Now, if there was truly long strength from this weekly long trade, although this legitimate HNS provides short-term short strength, the short-term long strength should override this and hit its right shoulder stop loss level before reaching its target height level. However, as you can see, price came right back down to its target height level and retained its short-term short strength. And this type of lower time frame confirmation, although not as strong as this lower time frame confirmation over here, does confirm that this long trade on the weekly chart did hit its target at that monthly gap level, and thus the weekly bias is short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. Okay, so in this way, although the euro pound does have tricky price action like so, it also does provide very obvious signs of price pattern confirmation, which can tell you whether the bias is long or short. All right, so let me just sum this up for you. Let's go back to the weekly chart. Okay, so again, on this weekly chart, that last bias was short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And that main target was hit right here. So at this point, I'm waiting for another weekly long trade to form, then perhaps a weekly short trade to form, so I can measure the differential of strength between the two to derive a weekly bias, whether long or short. Okay, and I'll also be looking for these biases on the daily chart also. Okay, all right, so that's it for the weekly forecast. I hope you guys have a great week, and thanks for watching. Okay, bye.